Hello and welcome to Bennett International's most current update on the global coronavirus pandemic and the impact on international education. This presentation is geared for parents who are currently on assignment with school-age children, families who are considering a possible future assignment, for employers and our relocation partners. And we'll also provide an overview of how we have at Bennett adapted our services to provide specific support in this current environment. I want to draw your attention at the beginning of this presentation to our website, where we will be updating events as they occur, and those will be the most current sources for information. As of today, 192 countries have closed all or most of their schools, impacting more than 1.5 billion students. The situation is changing on a daily basis, or perhaps even an hourly basis. Right now in the United States, a group of states in the Northeast have come together to coordinate their response regarding opening of businesses and schools. So New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and Delaware will be opening their schools no earlier than May 15th, and in all likelihood will be keeping schools closed for the rest of this school year. In the UK, there is no firm decision yet on the reopening of schools, although there are discussions about targeting some point in the month of May. In Germany, the Chancellor has recently announced that there will be a gradual reopening beginning on May 4th. It will vary by German state, also known as Länders, and will also vary based on the grade and age of the students. The government is explicit in saying that in order for a school to reopen, they have to have a plan for adhering to hygiene and distancing rules. Sweden is unusual in Europe, and for that matter in the world, in that it has kept schools open and done very little in the way of a lockdown. So it'll be interesting to watch that country going forward to see how it fares compared to the others. Spain and France are closed until at least May 11th, and that date may change. Similarly, Ireland is closed until at least May 5th. Many countries have shifted toward distance or online learning, but again, there has been a great variation in implementation around the globe, and even within various US states. France was well positioned for distance learning because the Centre National d'Éducation à Distance system was already existing, and that was allowing students around the world to participate in a French education. So that platform was adapted and has been used quite successfully. Germany had a historic prohibition and resistance to any form of homeschooling or distance learning, but in light of the pandemic, adjusted its approach and has been doing online learning since early March. Spain, recognizing that many students don't have access to the internet, or at least adequate access to the internet, has been making heavy use of television to supplement the internet platforms for education. In lesser developed countries and conflict zones such as Syria and Yemen, radio has actually been used very effectively to provide some level of instruction for students in very difficult situations. And in the USA, the implementation has varied greatly, not just by state, but also within states from district to district. Exams traditionally happen in many parts of the world at this time of year, and most of those, not surprisingly, have been either canceled or postponed. So the International Baccalaureate, which is a global standard for education for many international schools and many national schools that have adapted that particular platform, those IB exams, for the most part, have been canceled or postponed. As of this recording, the baccalaureate exams scheduled for France are still scheduled, but that may also change based on progress against the virus. The German Abitur was postponed until May. This will largely mirror the reopening of schools from one lender to the other. Holland has been much more flexible, allowing individual schools to make determinations regarding the timing of national exams. And in Australia, another federal state, the HSC exams are going forward, but again, individual schools have a lot of discretion regarding testing dates. In the state of Victoria, the GAT exam has been rescheduled from July until October. In Singapore, exams again were canceled, and individual test centers are reaching out to reschedule. In the UK, the government has just recently published guidelines regarding the GCSE, AS, and A-level exams for students. They're scheduled for this summer, and the government has published detailed information on a government website. Check the Bennett site for a link to that particular government website. The Cambridge curriculum, which is an adaptation of the British style curriculum, have also, for the time being, canceled exams and are working on rescheduling. In the US, advanced placement exams are being administered online. ACT and SAT exams are on hold, and the organizations are working very actively to fill in the schedule for the late summer and early fall to provide additional testing dates for anxious students. Despite all of these delays, cancellations, and closures, there's still a very good reason for families who are considering assignment to begin the search and application process for international schooling now, if they are considering an assignment. We urge families to do as much as they can at the moment in order to be prepared for the point at which schools begin to reopen. Even though in many cases classes are not meeting in person, admissions departments are functioning and are meeting with families. They're doing it virtually. Much of the search and application process, as we'll outline in a moment, can be done at a distance. And it's important to remember that because of the current disruptions in so many school systems, that the requirements for documents like children transcripts, teacher recommendations, and related information may take much longer than usual. So it's a good thing to start making those requests now, even if the documents won't be required for a long time. And finally, it's important to remember that the delays in making these applications may mean that there's going to be a lot more competition down the road when schools start to reopen. And it's important to remember that some schools, because of the stress of this closing and the loss of revenue, may be closed permanently. So while we don't know anything specific yet, it is possible that some areas such as Hong Kong, London, New York, which traditionally face a lot of competition already for entry to selective schools may have an even smaller supply of the schools that are right for assignees. And in various parts of the world, we are now starting to see, as we've seen with places like Germany, the beginning of reopening of schools. So demand for the upcoming year is very likely to start to pick up in the very near term. For families who are looking at schools without being able to actually visit them, there are a number of things that private and international schools are doing to accommodate those families. Here are some of the things that we think families should keep in mind as they are going through this virtual process. First, it's a great idea to ask schools and come to understand how schools have handled the COVID-19 situation. Try to get an understanding of how they did their ongoing education through virtual platforms. This could say a lot about how a school was able to respond to a crisis and the level of support it was willing to give their students, even in a difficult scenario. One should put together a list of the people that you would have wanted to meet had you been able to get to that school. You can ask the school to organize virtual meetings for you. This could be a special needs educator, teacher of a particular subject, the coach of a team or a sport that is of particular interest to your child. You can still go ahead and have those conversations and understand how the school would function and support your child in normal times. It's also a good idea to ask admissions departments about how, to the extent they can, look forward, how they view the changing demographic for their school. Will they be using, for example, more local students to fill seats rather than expatriates? Will there be other ways that they're going to change their admission process and change their student body in response to this very unusual situation? And then also feel free to make use of what we like to call uncurated online information about schools. Many schools, if you look them up in YouTube, for example, you'll find parent videos of school plays, sporting events, school meetings. And these can be very interesting and very insightful about a school. However, it's important to remember that these are uncurated, meaning that they are or can be biased or slanted based on who is actually posting the information. So make use of them, but do it with care. For employers, we encourage employers to think long-term and to make sure that they're working with their families to do this type of preparation now, even if the assignment may not happen, because if it does get the green light, again, there could be a lot of competition at the last minute. We always encourage employers and families to carefully review the contracts that they sign when they enroll their students in a school. This is true now more than ever because many schools are beginning to create provisions for the refund or partial forgiveness of a deposit based on the unusual circumstances of this COVID epidemic. So if the student is not able to actually attend in-person classes, some schools will consider refunding the deposit. So read the contracts carefully, have them reviewed, and make sure you understand what is actually being signed. Very few employers have had policies that address the support of online learning and tutoring. Up until this point, it hasn't, quite frankly, been necessary. However, given the recent developments with school closures and the need for online learning, more and more employers are being requested to provide assistance. This is an area that has to be addressed very carefully because there are a great many online learning providers in the market. Not all of them are accredited and not all of them are credible. So approach this with caution, and it's a lot easier to have a policy in place before the questions start coming in. So in this unusual environment, where it's virtually impossible to meet a family face-to-face, and where it's virtually impossible for a family to get to a school in person, what are the types of things that Bennett can and what are we currently doing for our client families? One of the most important elements of the Bennett service is the intake interview with the Bennett consultants, because this allows us to understand the family's concerns, the students' strengths and weaknesses, their interests, social and emotional history, etc. It really provides the platform for the support that we then provide to the family and to the student. This intake interview virtually always happens virtually, even before the COVID epidemic, so those are continuing. We provide a very useful overview of the family, of the host country landscape. This is everything from the types of schools and the admissions ages to the standardized exams that are provided, the selection of religious versus secular, single sex versus co-ed, etc. schools. So there's a great deal of information that can be provided to the family for their review and their consideration. We can also discuss schooling options in the home country for families who are repatriating or planning for some form of re-assimilation, whether it's an early end to the assignment because of the epidemic or just a regularly scheduled repatriation. We can provide school recommendations for each child and information about individual schools. We can evaluate the student's candidacy for those different types of schools. We can reach out to the admissions offices, which again are largely still open and functioning, to find out which schools have spaces in the particular grades that are in question. We can arrange the virtual visits and interviews. We can provide mock interviews for the families to help them prepare for those virtual visits. We can follow up with the admissions departments in these schools to ensure that the applications are complete, and we can advocate for the individual students with those schools. We can follow up also with both public and private schools of interest to the family. And then after the family receives offers of admission, we can provide guidance to the family to help them figure out which is the one they want to select for their student. And as per our website, we're continuing to provide up-to-date information on the exams provided around the world and the most recent status of those cancellations and delays. We can provide recommendations on tutoring, and we also provide tips for parents to navigate this entire process at our blog, and then also up-to-date education updates at our COVID website. We wish you all continued health and good fortune. Please check back at our website regularly and look for our next update to this webinar. Thank you for joining us.